Alright, y'all, what is going on? We are here today with a Final Fantasy tier list for the first 6 games. I have not played all of the Final Fantasies yet. That is the journey that I am on currently. I just completed 6 yesterday. Incredible, by the way. I'll get into that later. But I have done Final Fantasy 1 through 6, all of the pixel remasters now. And it has been a blast so far. So I wanted to make a little discussion, a little bit of a tier list, nothing too original. But yeah, let's get into it. I got some Final Fantasy 1 music going in the background. I'm going to try and have music for each game playing as I'm talking about them because, let's be honest, they're all fucking bangers. So many good tracks in all of the pixel remasters. Obviously they're all remastered tracks from the original NES and SNES versions of the games, but I mean, they're incredible. I mean, I was hearing a lot of them for the first time. The only game that I have played a little bit of, and I don't know the extent, but I've played Final Fantasy 3 DS version when I was younger, and I definitely didn't beat it because holy shit, that game gets really fucking hard later into it. But I definitely remember enjoying it a lot. So yeah, I've obviously played a few Final Fantasies, but I haven't played most of them, so that's why I started this journey. And I'm planning on reviewing all of them eventually, doing a tier list for all of them, and talking about certain ones a little bit more in depth. In particular, Final Fantasy 14, because I love that game, and also Final Fantasy 11. Those are the two exceptions for a lot of people, I've noticed, because they're MMOs, obviously, but I have played 11 a stupid amount, probably like years of my life into that game. And 14 I got into heavily in 2019, 2020, and have been into it since, so I really want to talk about both of those games more in depth, probably in their own videos, but I will rank them when we get to them. I'm probably going to do 1 through 6 for this video, and then 7 through 15 for the next video, and then I'll make other videos for 11, 14, and whatever other ones I feel like making videos about if I want to. But anyways, let's start with number 1. Final Fantasy 1, honestly, kind of surprising because I had low expectations being it being a game that came out in 1987, and obviously I have no bias against older games, but I mean, yeah, that's an old fucking game. I wasn't even born yet, I think the game that came out the year I was born was Final Fantasy 7, which I've yet to play. I know that's insane. But yeah, Final Fantasy 1 was honestly really fucking fun. I think I really enjoyed just the straightforwardness of it more than anything. It was just like, this is an RPG, go to this town, go to this town, go to this town, kill these guys. The gameplay loop was really kind of addicting and simple, and I loved that. But it was also challenging enough that I wasn't like bored out of my fucking mind. And some parts I remember being really annoying in particular. I think early game is definitely the hardest part of Final Fantasy 1, as I'm sure a lot of people would agree. Getting that fucking crown in that one place where everything poisons you, and God, I can't even remember the name of it, but it is hell, absolute hell in that place. And yeah, it's always fun, like starting out a new RPG and kind of going through those initial struggles. But Final Fantasy 1 was definitely fun in that way. I will give some disclaimer. I used guides for all of the games, not like to the T throughout the entire games, but definitely at parts where I felt like I don't know what the fuck I need to do next, or I don't know where I need to go. And honestly, for a lot of extra stuff, I ended up using it. So I think that definitely affected my experience with like the overall difficulties of the games, but not my enjoyment. I really enjoyed being able to kind of find all the little secrets and experience all the little things that the game has. I think it's definitely, as the series goes on, there's more and more little things that you can miss in a lot of ways. So I'm glad that I did follow guides, but I think maybe going forward with the other games, I might try and just go no guide as much as I can, unless I absolutely need to, because I kind of just want to have that fresh new game experience, like as if I was a kid. So in hindsight, I probably would have done that. But anyways, back to Final Fantasy 1. I think the other part that I really struggled with was, I mean, not really struggled with, but the final boss kind of kicked my ass a little bit. And I remember looking up things like, how do you beat the final boss? You know, like typical bullshit. But I ended up just like stacking sabers and a bunch of attack boosts on my monk. Another funny thing about Final Fantasy 1, my experience with Final Fantasy 1 was I didn't even have a white mage in my party, so that was pretty fun. I just had a red mage, which honestly wasn't like a huge deal. Like looking into it, it wasn't. I remember when I first started, I was like, do you need a white mage? Like looking at Reddit posts and shit, but it really wasn't that big of a deal. So I'm glad I, just was like, okay, I'm going to make my party however I want, and ended up working out. And that's kind of a similar thing. Like, I feel like in all of the first 6 games, you can kind of wing it for the most part in terms of party composition and kind of get away with it, because they're pretty well designed in a way that like you can make it work no matter what your situation is, and in Final Fantasy 1, I don't remember grinding too much for levels or gil or anything, which was nice. I enjoy grinding, but not too much. I want it to feel like it's a worthwhile grind, like I'm grinding for a reason that feels significant, and I don't want to grind for like an hour and then feel like I could just steamroll the rest of the game. And I never really felt like I was steamrolling the entire game in one. Like there was always like some kind of challenge, so that was cool. The story, I guess I'll talk about. Not super enthralling by any means compared to a lot of the other games within the first 6, but it's there. Like it's there. It's pretty simple. I like the overall medieval themes and world in most of the Final Fantasy games, I would say, or at least the ones that I've played so far. So I appreciate that. And obviously you got it's cool because I've played 14, like I've said, and a lot of the characters and areas in Final Fantasy 1 are in 14, so experiencing those for the first time was really one of the coolest things, and kind of connecting them and seeing how it translated to a more modern game, like, I don't know, 30 years later. So I think that was probably one of the coolest experiences playing 1. In terms of like just my overall enjoyment of it, I don't know if I kind of want to start low so I have room to kind of spread them around, but I'm sure I'm going to move these once I have them all in place. There's only 6, it's not like a crazy commitment, but I'll probably give 1 a solid B or C. I'll start with C. I mean, it's the first one. I would say that most people would say that it's the weakest, but that's just what I've kind of seen generally from people online. Definitely is not the case, for everyone. I think a lot of people have nostalgia for this game, but I have nothing in that department for it. I definitely do have some nostalgia for 3 and some other games that I haven't, or that I've played already, but I had no nostalgia for 1 besides, I guess, some of the songs and areas that I knew from 14, but but I tried not to let nostalgia or any other extraneous feelings cloud my judgment of it. And honestly, I think 1's pretty solid. It's a solid RPG, and as someone who has played a fuck ton of RPGs, like, I had no problem getting through it, and honestly enjoyed it more than I expected to, being the first entry of the series and it being how old that it is. And yeah, I'm gonna go with C. Okay, so now we got Final Fantasy 2, which the music's playing now, and I'm kind of remembering some things, and man, it was at first Final Fantasy 2 was like jarring. I was like, what the fuck? Like, there's a kind of a thick story going on right from the get-go, and the music was hitting. Oh my god, that overworld theme and this one, oh my god, there was a lot of great music in 2 as well. And yeah, the story, like, I was really like focusing on the narrative like way more than 1 was from the get-go, and I love that. I love a good story, obviously. And right off the bat too, the combat was quite different from 1, with the kind of leveling up certain weapons and being able to customize and change You could have anyone use a certain weapon and magic and spells, and it would affect their stats. And a really interesting concept. Like, I don't think I had played an RPG like that before, and it kind of like really impressed me. I was like, this is cool. It's kind of neat. And I think as the game went on, I was more like, okay, like this is pretty simple, like bare bones in its implementation, but like I still enjoyed it quite a bit, like throughout the entire game. And the way that you just kind of were able to change things on the fly however you wanted to, and you got certain characters that came in and out of the story. And yeah, I'm having trouble remembering a lot of what happens in the story. Let me go take a look at what the fuck happened in this game. Okay, so I did look into the story. I'm actually recording this after the video has been completed because I'm a fucking idiot and I don't know how to use OBS. And I probably paused it while I was talking about how I actually felt about it at the time. But anyways, the story in 2 was a little bit convoluted, a little interesting. I did like how much they were trying different things in 2. A lot of like risky kind of, more edgy tones in the story for sure, which I love. But some of the like emotional moments did not really have much of a punch. A lot of the character deaths, because you had like the 3 main characters who were solid throughout the whole game, and then you had the 4th that was constantly dying, and then you'd get a new one and dying and you get a new one, which was cool because like you got to have different jobs. And well, fucking jobs, there's like no jobs in that game anyways. Like you could make your character like 10 different jobs if you wanted to. But I think I mostly still kind of had my layout as like, oh, like one person's kind of like the magic damage dealer, one person's a physical damage dealer, one person's kind of more tanky physical damage, and then like a healer. But with this one, you could really mix and match quite a bit more, which was cool. And yeah, it made me think that like this was like the platform that needed to be made, the foundation that needed to be made for a lot of the more complex things later in this series, like 6 and 5. Like those combat systems and the stories are fucking incredible. And I think they needed to experiment with 2 in order to make those strides to make it more solid later on, kind of refine the formula. So yeah, I appreciate this game, I think, a lot more than it seems like a lot of people on the internet do. Like I think it's fucking solid, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. Like I would put it above 1. I think some people would say it's worse than 1, but no, like I think it's definitely it's a good game, like I don't remember like ever feeling like, oh, this sucks. I will say some of the dungeons and bosses weren't as interesting as some of the other, well, definitely like the later games, but even 1, like there's more memorable dungeons in 1, maybe because I've also seen some of the dungeons and areas in 14. But yeah, I would say like it wasn't like super crazy. I will say 2 had an awesome like ending thing with Pandemonium going into the final fucking fight against the Emperor. And also like the fact that he was just murdering motherfuckers. Like that was pretty cool in the story. Like I do like the Final Fantasy stories where like shit goes wrong, like in 6 and 2 and even 4 a little bit. I fuck with that. I like when bad shit actually happens. So I do appreciate it for its riskiness and in all areas, the story and the combat. I think it was a huge experiment, and it worked for the most part. I honestly do believe it did. And even though you could probably exploit the combat into quite a bit, like it was my first time playing it, so like I wasn't trying to do anything crazy. I wanted to play the game as it was meant to be played to some extent, and I still followed a guide for a good chunk of it, but it wasn't like to the T. I wasn't like, oh my god, where do I have to go next? What do I have to do? I tried to give myself a little bit of leniency with like, sometimes I would just play the game and not look at the guide. But the one thing I did look at the guides for a lot was like chest locations and secret areas, because like I don't want to miss the secret stuff, the stuff that I'm obviously not going to get on my first playthrough, because I think it's cool to collect some of that stuff and have like some of the more cool weapons and armors that are hidden, in plain sight. So I don't really feel too bad about that. But yeah, I'd say 2 is a solid B. Yeah. Okay, so number 3 is really special to me, honestly. Hearing this song now and kind of, again, it's almost impossible not to have some bias when it comes to nostalgia because, I don't know, it's just, I think it was the first Final Fantasy game that I ever played, or maybe I might have played 11 first, weirdly enough, because I got into 11 at a really young age through my friend, which is a whole nother story. I'll probably talk about that in a separate video like I was saying, but yeah, I don't know. And the other thing too is the Pixel remaster felt so much different than my memory of playing it on the DS. Like, obviously it looks completely different, but obviously a lot of the gameplay and story things are pretty similar from what I've heard. They just might have some extra content in 3, and the difficulty might be a little different, whatever. I don't remember exactly all the big differences, but I really enjoyed 3. Like, 3 was a big step up from 1 and 2, just in overall enjoyment. And I mean, throughout the whole game, I think 3 is honestly one of the more challenging ones out of the first 6, weirdly enough. I remember actually having to grind at various points in 3 and, you know, look up certain things and be like, how the fuck do you do this? How do you beat this boss? And some caveat, I didn't, like, cheese all the bosses or anything. Like, I played all of them pretty fair for the most part. Maybe a few exceptions, if you want to call it cheese, but really just using the game's mechanics. I mean, I guess you could say with 1, I don't know. I mean, is it really cheese if you're just playing the game how it's designed to be played? It's up for debate. But anyways, 3 was great. I mean, the fucking bangers after banger after banger music. Like, again, Crystal Tower theme. Oh my god. I mean, this shit in 14 slaps. Fucking cry every time when this song plays in that game, and hearing it in this game in a different context and a different story, it was really cool. And the story obviously had a lot of connections to things that I already knew, and just seeing them in 3, some of them for the first time, honestly I couldn't remember. I don't think I paid attention to the story when I played it as a kid, to be honest. But so it was pretty much for the first time, and I really enjoyed it. Like, all the little banter between the characters, and just, I think a lot of the dungeons were really short and sweet and fun, and the temples that you went to, I remember the water temple in the early game was really fun and challenging, and because you had to, I think you were mini in that dungeon, and yeah, there's a lot of little memories that I have of that, playing that game still, that were really cool. And I think I do have a picture, I'll pull it up, of the final fight of that game. Yeah, I'll try and blow this up. So yeah, it was like, this is the final fight against whoever the fuck, Cloud of Darkness. And it was down to the wire. Like, holy crap. I remember I was like really nervous that I was fucked. I think I was just spamming bio with this guy, which is probably my worst attack out of all of them. You know, like, you're throwing shurikens with Morgan. I think Frankie for me was a monk or black. I don't. Oh, I gotta remember that. Let me pull up the game. I don't know. I can't remember the exact job. I know that's Ninja, White Mage, and can't remember the name. God, it really seems like I haven't played these games, but I swear I have, guys. Anyways, yeah, like, this was so, you know, you have those moments when you're doing a fight in a game and you're like down to the fucking wire and you're like, oh, come on, please, like, let me beat this. And I didn't like have a huge struggle against Cloud of Darkness necessarily, but holy fuck, the dungeon leading up to Cloud of Darkness, that shit was hell. Like, annoying as fuck, and in some good ways and some bad ways. Like, the amount of HP that all of the bosses leading up to Cloud of Darkness have is absurd. I remember the fights taking forever, and the game itself took pretty long. Like, there were a lot of things going on in this game, and I loved it. Like, don't get me wrong, but it was wild. It was a wild one, and yeah, I don't know. I think the combat in this game is great. Like, all of the different jobs that you can change into and kind of transfer over. Like, the progression of it felt very like smooth and simple, which I appreciated. I'm looking at the jobs right now on my other monitor. So yeah, we got the Onion Knight Freelancer. I don't think I use them too much. I mean, you start with Onion Knight, obviously, but yeah. So I had, God, it's hard to tell with this art. Oh yeah, so I think I had Kylie, whatever the fuck her name is, as a sage from the looks of it, or maybe summoner, probably sage. Sage, ninja, yep, devout, and I think Frankie was Magus? I don't fucking know. I can't tell from this picture, but I could probably go look. But regardless, I fucking love 3. Like, it has a soft spot for me, and honestly, even after playing the next 3 games, like, it still holds up pretty well in my head, and yeah, I mean, God, I love this song. Oh, this is just a loop of the Crystal Tower theme, but yeah, I think I'm gonna put it in A. Like, so far it's just a straight shot, but I think I'll probably move some games around once I'm all the way done with this. All right. Any other thoughts that I might have about 3? I don't believe so. It's another simple, fun, great game, great RPG, you know? Yeah, let's move on to 4. I mean, come on, dude. Edward's Harp, what a good fucking song. Let's not even talk about the game for a moment. This song, when I first heard it, I was feeling it in my soul. Like, holy shit. Beautiful ass song. It was magical, that moment. And like, I remember the scene of it too. Like, Edward had just lost his girl. It was the princess, right? And I mean, yeah, it wasn't like a huge build-up or anything, but it was sad, you know, like losing your loved one. And I was like, damn, I was kind of surprised to see that happen so early in the game. And Edward as a character is kind of interesting. He sucks ass. Like, he's terrible in the game, but he's a sweet guy, and like, he's struggling with like the loss of his girl after that event, and you kind of go throughout the game, and I think he gets lost for a bit, and there's this whole thing. And I think the story in 4 was really cool from the get-go. Like, the shit with I mean, the main character, like, basically being a piece of shit evil guy who was just murdering people with for the king without even questioning it, and then kind of having this moment of like, what the hell am I doing? And I love like retribution stories, and just like someone who's like morally gray. And yeah, I think 4 was like really surprising narratively for me, and it was a welcome surprise, because it was really cool to see them get more serious and kind of do some of these darker tones. I will say it's something I do remember with 4 stories, like the amount of people just dying out of nowhere. I was like, you're dying? Like, what? I can't remember specifically which ones, but some of them I was just like, okay, like, see ya. So yeah, I mean, obviously it wasn't always like super solid story wise, but overall I do really appreciate it in comparison to the first few games. I will say again about 3, like, the story was pretty solid. There was just a lot happening, and 4 felt a bit slower, focusing on characters more, which I think is really important to any story, is kind of fleshing out the characters and taking your time with them. But yeah, it was cool. Like, it was really cool to see that change up from 3 to 4. I would say that 4's combat is pretty good too. Nothing crazy for me about it. I did like how you had like the set jobs, like Kane was the Dragoon, and then the change up from God, it's really embarrassing that I'm not remembering the main characters' names. Whatever his name is, you know, I'll figure that out after. But the main character obviously turns from a Dark Knight into a Paladin pretty early on in the story, and that was tight because I love Paladin as a job just in the whole Final Fantasy series. And yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of the things that happened in the story were kind of like confusing at points, and I was like, this isn't exactly, you know, a solid plot with no holes, but it was just enjoyable throughout the whole thing. I remember some parts of it I was slowing down, maybe just because of life events and whatever, but I think it was just a solid game all around. Once again, like I don't have anything terribly bad to say about any of these games on the list. I gotta say, it's hard to. I think I have a soft spot for RPGs, and Final Fantasy in particular is really a special series to me, and it's becoming even more so, playing through a lot of these games that I've never played before. Damn, that's kind of loud. Let's find another good song over here. That's cool. Yeah. Again, it's gonna seem ridiculous. Well, S tier we gotta save for some of the next two, I believe, potentially. So I'll put that there. It is better than 3, I believe, even though I do have a soft spot for 3. Actually, let me think about that, because in terms of my overall enjoyment of the game, gameplay, story, everything combined, 3 might be ahead a little bit, because I don't know. I think I do enjoy the combat system in 3 and the simplicity of 3 a bit more. And just overall, like, I think I just kind of remember feeling like this flow in the game when I was playing it. 4, I had some moments where I took some breaks and stopped and came back to it. And again, some of like the weird, like ass pulley, like, I mean, not ass pull, but like weird deaths that happened out of nowhere with no build up. I was like, okay, like I guess I care about this character dying. Not really. But I do really appreciate it story wise for what it did. I think the story is a little bit better than 3's, but overall, as a full package, 3 was maybe a little bit better for me. I'm gonna go with that. All right. So Final Fantasy V, really quite an interesting one among all of the games. I think this one has more of a focus on the combat and the gameplay than any of them, really. And not in a bad way. I think the combat in 5 is pretty fucking awesome. And as the game went on, I was like appreciating it more and more. I think when I first started, I was like, okay, this is cool, but like it wasn't really like, you kind of have to put a little bit of time into 5 before it starts to kind of show you the complexity of its job system and the way that you can attach abilities to characters and kind of mix and match and kind of have everyone do anything if you put the time into it. And I really liked having the same cast of characters throughout the game. That was pretty cool, for the most part. And yeah, honestly, I think it was a really well done game all around. Like the story didn't feel like it had any like really weird moments. It was just like fairly simple and to the point, which I can appreciate about any story, but especially like in this circumstance, like 5 just felt like it had I don't know, it was just really easy to get into and enjoy. Like when I'm thinking about some other stories in the first 6 games, like 2 and maybe even 4 a little bit, you know, with their stories being a little more convoluted and not as interesting to me. But I mean, I don't know, I don't want to say that about 4 entirely. I don't know, maybe I'm kind of jumbling all my thoughts around right now, but I don't know. I think 5 is just a really fun fucking game. Like, I think it would probably, I don't know if it's better combat than 6, because, and I'll talk about this more when I talk about 6, but I loved how much you were able to just like have everything on every character in that game if you were willing to, you know, grind it out a little bit. 5 was like really grindy with like having to get the different points and then having all of your different abilities on like each character. Like I didn't care that much about like having the most complex things, because another thing I noticed with all of this, the first 6 games, is like you could do a lot of extra shit and grind shit out, but you really don't need to. Like these games are not like designed to be stupendously hard, and I think I expected them to be a little harder, all of them overall, but I'm not upset about the difficulty, because I think kind of the flow of the game would be a little worse in all of them if they were like really hard. And there were some really hard spots too, don't get me wrong. And I will say my perception of difficulty was probably heavily influenced by the fact that I was following a guide for a lot of these things. So like I found the little secrets, and they told me, oh, you might want to grind a little bit before this, or make sure you have this equipped. It kind of loses that element of surprise and kind of figuring out like, oh, what's the best thing to use here. And I do regret that a little bit, and I think going forward, that's why I want to try and be a bit more blind and work my way through the games as best as I can with, without any guidance. But and 5 had some great humor. Like I'm staring over at some of the scenes playing out while the music is playing, and they just had like these funny little moments, and I like the progression of like the sprites and like the way that they animated them, the little like icons they have above their head with like hearts and exclamation points and everything. I like the dynamics. I think one of the strongest points of these first 6 games is when the characters were like around for a while in whatever games that they stayed more consistent. And I do like those games more because they took the time to like flesh out the characters and have more interesting interactions between them, and funny interactions and sad interactions, and just all this like backstory. And then it obviously leads up to the crescendo of the game, and it's like, wow, like it feels a lot more impactful because you've been with these characters for so long. And I think that's why I like 6, again, spoiler, the most, is because it took its fucking time with everything. And 5 took me a while to beat, but I think 6 might be the longest. I might double check that real quick. Hold on. So I did check. I think I had about 39 hours in 5, and I had 55 hours in 6. So quite a bit more in 6. And not surprising, because I think the game is just objectively longer to beat. I did not like 100% these games by any means, not even close for most of them. And 5 was no exception with that. I pretty much just went for the main story and did some extra things if I felt like, oh yeah, I want to get this ability or this magic spell or this whatever, this weapon. Because honestly, it's fun to grind out those things sometimes, or like find like the secret thing that makes you a little bit more OP, and you're like, okay, cool. I did a lot of those things for sure. But yeah, for 5, I gotta say, I think I enjoyed it. It's hard to say now that I'm really thinking about it. Like I was thinking before this video, I'm like, oh, is this gonna be the 1 through 6 getting increasingly better and better? But I don't think that is gonna be the case now that I'm thinking about it all together. I think 5 was pretty simple in its story. So I don't mind simple, but it was maybe a little too simple compared to some of the other ones, especially when like the more like narratively focused ones like 2 and 4, which I did appreciate. But also when you go a little bit tighter in the story and there's those plot holes, then they're a little more glaring than if it's a little simpler and there's a few little things that are off. You know what I mean? So I think will give 5 a little bit of a pass on that. And I think I got to give it huge props for being really one of the more interesting, definitely better combat than the first 4. And just like combining all of the different ideas and kind of having this whole freedom of being able to make each character whatever the fuck you want and have as much complexity as you want. I think that's really cool. Again, a lot of these games surprised me with how complex they were in their combat. I think like I wasn't expecting the original games to be so interesting in those ways, and I was pleasantly surprised because it made it a hell of a lot more fun to play and experience for the first time. So yeah, I think I would probably place 5 not in S tier, because when I think S tier, I'm like, this is like some peak, all around. And 5 wasn't like peak all the way through. There were definitely some slower points in the story. I love the dungeons and the bosses in 5 for sure. There were a lot of cool ones. The game felt pretty long too, like compared to some of the other ones. So it took me a bit to get through, but I enjoyed it like pretty much the entire way through. And I think 5 was really cool with like the final boss leading into it, and you unlock like the mime or the mimic, and you're able to like use fucking everything. Or I think Freelancer too, I realized like, wait a minute, like Freelancer doesn't gain any action points, so you could just equip them with whatever the fuck you want because they can wear anything, and then they could have whatever. It was so cool to like just go into that last fight and be like, I feel like a god. like all of my characters felt godly. And I don't even think I steamrolled the last fight that hard, but it was just cool to like see it all culminate into this just, you know, you can equip your characters with all the most badass shit you've collected throughout the entire game. I thought that was awesome. So I might give it a 5 with the S tier, but no, it's better than, I think it is like 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 4, 3, and then 5, and then I'm already gonna put this here. Come on, we haven't even started yet, but you already know. Also, I forgot the music, but that's fine. Let's get into 6. Let me get some music going on here. So, obviously, a little bit of recency bias here, but I do believe that Final Fantasy VI is truly one of the best games I've ever played. Definitely one of the best RPGs I've ever played, and probably one of my favorite experiences playing a game for the first time. Like, I knew the hype going into it. You know, I knew that 6 had this huge reputation as being one of the best Final Fantasy games, and definitely one of the best of the pixel remasters in the original 6, or even, I guess, 7, 8, 9, 10. I don't know. People kind of group the Final Fantasies in different ways, you know? So, yeah, I mean, holy fuck. From the get-go until the very end, I was hooked on this game. I mean, I had a back injury the week that I played it, but every day I was looking forward to playing this fucking game. I was totally enamored by it. Like, I have chills just thinking about it. Like, I know it's nerdy as fuck, but wow. I mean, it was just so fucking cool. All of the ideas that had developed throughout the entire first 5 games culminated into this beautiful fucking peak work of fiction. And I mean, the storytelling, let's just start there. Very like dark, very gritty, very like, okay, this is fucked up. Like, Terra's mind controlled, like this whole thing, and then she's waking up and she's like, oh shit, like I'm actually like a human, like kind of a mix between a human and a Esper. And yeah, I mean, it just, all the characters that you meet feel like so relevant to a decent extent. I will say, like, maybe like Strago and Rem, I didn't really care for as much because they were a bit later in the game. But even then, I mean, everyone's got their favorites in this game, but it goes to show, like, the characters are actually very memorable compared to a lot of the other games so far. And not to say that the other characters in the other games were like totally shit, but this game is just in a different league. You know, it's doing things at a different level, and that's in every aspect, I think. The story, as I was saying, was fucking incredible. I loved it. I loved how in the early game you had these different scenarios, and you would play as different characters and be kind of constricted to that and have to kind of adjust the way that you were playing the game based on who you were using and having to use. Everyone was their own job. Everyone was their own thing, had their own, you know, different ways of doing things, and the things that they contributed to the story as well as the gameplay. I mean, fuck, it is so good. I mean, I could just gush about this shit for hours. I think, honestly, the combat, like everyone said, the combat in 5 was like incredible, which it is, but I think I like 6's more. And that's because the idea of like being able to like make your character as complex as you want them to, like in 5, how you could do so many different abilities and like have like white magic and like the Beastmaster control ability on one character and a bunch of other shit. Like that was really cool. Like the kind of spectrum, like may have been a bit wider on 5, but in 6, like it's so much more focused and like tight. The way the combat works and the systems in the game and the job systems and your different abilities that each character has and the way that they kind of work with everyone's. And then you got Espers and I fucking loved being able to control the magic, like all of the different magic that you could learn, and the way that you raised your stats with Espers. Oh my fucking god, that was so smart. I was just really impressed with how well designed this game was, like as a whole. It felt like I was playing a new RPG that could have came out yesterday, you know, like it was something that I hadn't experienced before in all ways. Like and that's after playing the first 5 games. So that goes to show, like, this game stands high even among a lot of these really good games. You know, like, if I'm really thinking about it too, like, even though Final Fantasy 1 is in C, I would probably give it a 6 or 7 out of 10. Likewise with 2. Fucking 4 is probably like 7 or an 8. 3, 7 or 8. 5, 8 or 9. And then, you know, fucking 6 is probably a 10. You know, it does have some flaws. I guess I could try and, you know, nitpick some things. Like, it's hard when you, again, recency bias, and you really fucking love a game. Like, I don't know, like, it's hard to nitpick because, I mean, again, this game came out in fucking 1984 or 1994, and for the time it came out, I mean, it's timeless. I could see myself replaying this game in 5 years and being blown away and experiencing a bunch of different things that I didn't get to experience the first time. And I don't know, oh god. And then the story, the way that it has, like, the first half in, like, the world of balance, and then you go to the world of ruin, you can kind of see how I remember a lot of the things from this game in particular, not only because I just played it recently and binged it pretty hard, but also because a lot of the stuff is just more memorable. Like, this is easily the most memorable story of the first 6 Final Fantasy games, easily. And that's why it's at the top of the list. But again, the gameplay, the bosses, the dungeons, everything about it, the way that, you know, you had to, oh my god, one of my favorite moments from the game, when Kefka fucks the whole world up by, you know, in the first half of the game, at the end of the first half of the game, first half-ish, where the Warring Triad is, like, reawoken, and they fuck the whole land up, and it's like Pangea shit, and you end up in the world of ruin, and you're Celeste, and that shit was honestly heartbreaking. I kept feeding fucking Sid just all of the fish. I had no idea. I didn't read the guide because at some points I didn't want to read the guide because I was just experiencing the game as is, and it was really fucking amazing. So I was just feeding Sid all of the fish at the fucking cabin. And I was like, why does he keep saying the same things, or why does he keep going back and forth? And then I look it up and I'm like, oh my god, I've been poisoning this man constantly. And I didn't know the timer went down as, like, time went on, so I definitely was just, like, sitting there at points, like, looking stuff up, and he was dying. And I was just letting him die. And then even when I figured it out, I kept on getting the fast fish. I would get one fast fish, bring it back, and keep doing that, and he kept on getting worse and worse, and I'm like, why? And I realized I was going too slow, and he had already was at, like, a pretty shitty status, so it was just like, it was fucked. And it was kind of funny in hindsight. But then when I saw the consequence of that, which is him fucking dying, and then Celeste jumping off a cliff, and what? Like, there just wasn't any of that level of emotional impact in any of the first 5 games. And then they bring out this really heavy shit that, like, hits. It really does hit, you know? Like, even though, like, maybe some of the buildup is not, like, the most complex, you know, Game of Thrones level fucking shit, it still hits, you know? To, like, have a character that you've been playing with for the past 30 hours, like, try and fucking kill themselves because they are so overcome with grief and sorrow because they are stuck on an island and they have no fucking way to get, like, it hits. I don't know how else to say it. It just fucking hits. And there were a few moments like that, you know, where it really hit. A lot of the characters have sad ass backstories, and they have really emotional scenes, and fucking Shadow decides to kill himself at the end of the game for some reason. I did not like that personally. Yeah, it goes along with, like, his whole, like, guilting himself, but, like, I wish he overcame that and was like, okay, I have homies now, we just saved the world. Like, it was done. He's like, well, why can't you just fucking live, man? I didn't have a huge attachment to Shadow in particular, but, like, I don't know. I think my favorite characters were definitely Celeste. Might be my favorite just because of that one scene in particular, and everything else. Locke was pretty cool. Sabin. I really liked Edgar. My final, like, group to kill Kefka was Celeste, Sabin, Edgar, and Gao. Oh, I love Gao. Yeah, I love Gao. I like the little scenes with him. Oh, that one like optional scene where you got to go like see his dad. That was really fucking sad because like I didn't remember him or something. I can't remember the full context, but like it was sad. And the way that like at the end when you're fighting Kefka and he's like I got friends now, like I have people that care about me, you know, like, and he's just like talking in gibberish because he was fucking grown up with dinosaurs and shit. So it's just like, yeah, there's a lot of little moments in this game, so many, and it feels so full of life because of that. And don't get me fucking started on the music, man. When you're talking about music and its ability to kind of tell a story just by the music itself, next level. Final Fantasy VI has that next level music that is just hitting everything it needs to for the exact way that it needs to in the story. And the vibes. It's just the vibes really for me, man. Like each zone feels so unique because of the music and the way that everything feels so unique. I will say about the first 5 games, like a lot of repeated songs was kind of an annoying trend, honestly. And like I get it, like you can't just make unique songs for like a fucking 30-40 hour game, 30 to 50 hour game, I guess. I get that, but like 6, they damn near did that, and it was incredible. I was constantly gushing, sitting on the fucking couch playing this game. I was telling my girl, I'm like, you hear this shit? Like, this is crazy. And even her, she was like, yeah, like she's like, I like this. Like, this is great. So many different styles of music. That fucking, oh my God, I need to find the jazzy, I think it's this shit. The fucking coal mine sax. Oh my God. Get the fuck out of here. I mean, it's too clean. It's like a game cannot be this clean. It shouldn't be allowed. Oh my God. It really exceeded expectations. I had high expectations already, you know? Really, I did. Like, and that's tricky. I also like the overworld theme. That's fire. I had really high expectations because everyone said 6 is the best, or their favorite, or 6 is the best of like the original mainline games, whatever. The turn-based games, you could even say. You know, people have different groupings of, you know, games that they, you know, within Final Fantasy that they like to talk about in a certain way. I just remember the opera scene. Didn't expect some beautiful opera in the game, just with actual singing. Like, what the fuck? That was incredible. God, like the directing of the scenes was so fucking cool. Like, all the stylistic choices in this game, combined with the way the story was told, combined with the way the gameplay was, it just fucking worked, man. And it worked so well. And I've never played this game in my life, so there's no bias for nostalgia like there is with 3 maybe for me, or anything like that. There's no one in my life that's like, oh yeah, 6 is incredible, you gotta play that. Besides what I heard from people on the internet, you know, random fucks, but it worked for me. It really did, and I'm so glad it did, because holy shit, it was a hell of an experience. And I keep telling people, a lot of my friends now, like, yo, you gotta play 6. You've gotta play Final Fantasy 6. Like, that is, if you're gonna play one of the original 6, that is the one. But I will say, like, I guess we're kind of moving on more to do a discussion now, and I'm gonna keep playing 6 music because it's my favorite music in the first 6 games. But I gotta say, like, I think all of these games are worth playing. If you love RPGs, if you love Final Fantasy, if you love experiencing new things in video games, different art pieces, this is necessary. For me, at least, it felt necessary. And that's why I'm going through the whole series, because every single one of these games feels like its own world, its own unique thing, its own unique twist on a fantasy story. And it's fucking awesome, man. Like, it's super nerdy, and I'm gonna be nerdy throughout all of my videos because I am a nerd. But like, it's just, I don't know, it's incredible what the people who made these games was able to do at the time that they did it, And the fact that they've been doing it for years and years and years and years, and just thousands and thousands of hours of stories and characters and gameplay, and just, I don't know, it blows my mind. As someone who's always played video games, I've played so many video games in my entire life, and they just stand out, you know, and they hit different. And obviously, I think that's going to affect my... I am biased, you know? I am biased towards loving these games because it's just, for me personally, as a person, the way that I've lived my life and all the video games that I've played, it just hits a different spot. It really does. And I'm glad it does, because I have so many fucking awesome games to play because of that. And it just makes me even more excited after playing these games to play the next, 9 games? And then I got Final Fantasy Tactics, which I played a little bit of, but I want to play that all the way through, and the 7 remake. I mean, there's just so much good shit, and obviously I'm still playing 14, and I'll probably play 11 again at some point, because I go back to it every 3 years. And honestly, I could see myself replaying a lot of these games at different points. I kind of want to try some of the original NES and SNES versions of these games for sure. I know they have some Game Boy Advance, like, extra content in some of the games, and from what I've heard, like, it wasn't like super relevant, but I mean, it would be cool to just experience it all the way through. Maybe like 100% some of these games. I could definitely see myself doing that with 6. You know, a lot of the guides that I was looking at, that was like filling out the beast area, and I was like, I don't know about that. But in 6, I remember just wanting to keep playing. You know, like, I wasn't sad that the game was ending, because I definitely felt like it had done what it intended to do, like, fully. Also, this Chocobo song fucking slaps. The way he says Chocobo and spells it out, that's pretty tight. But yeah, I think that's gonna wrap up the video. Honestly, I've probably been going for a long ass time overall, and I got all my thoughts out for the most part. I will say that in the future, I think I'm gonna try and write out my thoughts about the game after I complete each game, so that I have more to talk about, because a lot of this was like going back and kind of remembering what the fuck happened in some of the earlier games, which I apologize for. I mean, it's whatever. Like, I think the video is still going to be good and worthwhile. This is really for me. Like, making this video is really just recording my experiences of these games for the first time. I think it's really cool to have some kind of proof of something that you did that was significant, even if it's just a fucking video game. You know, it's important to me, so that's why I'm doing it, you know. And I hope some people can resonate with that and kind of enjoy this video, and, you know, I hope you look forward to more if you are watching, if anyone's watching. All right, peace out, y'all.